Have you ever felt like, no matter how hard you try, you'll never be good enough for your own family? That no matter what you do, someone will always be the favorite, while you're left on the sidelines? Now, imagine living like this your whole life, watching your brother or sister get everything handed to them, while you fight to earn every small piece of recognition. But what if one day, you finally had the chance to turn the tables? This is the story of a man who spent years being ignored by his parents until an unexpected inheritance revealed dark secrets, family betrayals, and a fight for what was rightfully his. But the ending, the ending is something no one saw coming. Stay with me until the end, because this story will surprise you.
For as long as he could remember, Ethan had always been an afterthought, the child no one seemed to notice. While his younger sister, Emma, was treated like royalty, he grew up in the shadows, trying to understand why he was never enough for his own parents. His earliest memories were filled with a pattern that would become painfully normal. On Christmas mornings, Emma unwrapped extravagant gifts, imported dolls, brand new bikes, expensive electronics. Ethan, a pair of socks, a school book, or worse, nothing. He watched as his parents' eyes sparkled with joy as they watched Emma open her presents, while his own presence barely seemed to register. On his 10th birthday, Ethan hoped for a small celebration, or at least a cake, but the day passed like any other. No party, no gifts, not even a happy birthday. The following week, his parents threw a lavish birthday party for Emma. A pool, a buffet, inflatable games, everything a child could dream of. When he asked why she got a party and he didn't, the answer was cold and dismissive. "You're too old for that." The favoritism wasn't just about gifts, it was emotional too. If Emma cried, their parents rushed to comfort her. If Ethan was upset, he was told to stop being dramatic. If Emma made a mistake, it was brushed aside. If Ethan slipped up, he was scolded harshly. As the years passed, nothing changed. In high school, Emma received the latest smartphone on her first day of class. Ethan, despite needing one for schoolwork, was handed an old, barely functional model. He slowly realized that no matter how hard he tried, his efforts would never be acknowledged. He got top grades, won competitions, and was praised by teachers. But at home, it meant nothing. More and more, Ethan asked himself, "What did I do to deserve this?" But the truth was, he had done nothing wrong. The real problem was his parents' favoritism. Teenage years are supposed to be a time of discovery and new opportunities, but for Ethan, it was just the continuation of an unfair cycle. While his sister Emma remained the center of attention, he learned that in his own home, he would always have to fight alone for even the smallest achievements. The favoritism became even more obvious when Emma turned 16. To celebrate, their parents threw her a party straight out of a movie. A huge venue, luxury decorations, a DJ, full catering, and even a custom-made dress. And the gift, a brand new car, handed to her with tears of joy from their mother and applause from their father. Ethan watched in silence. He thought back to his own 16th birthday. Just another ordinary day. No party, no presents, just a quick happy birthday and a small cake he bought himself with money from his part-time job. But that was the pattern. If Emma wanted something, all she had to do was ask. If Ethan needed anything, it was a problem. When Emma decided she wanted to study abroad, their parents covered everything without hesitation. When Ethan mentioned the possibility of taking an extra course to improve his school performance, he got a cold response. "If you want it, find a way to pay for it yourself." So he did. Ethan started working at a bookstore part-time to save money for the course. Over time, he got used to the idea that if he wanted something, he would have to earn it himself. But deep down, he still longed for the impossible, his parents' recognition. His hard work began to pay off when, in his senior year, Ethan earned a scholarship to one of the best universities in the country. It was a moment of pure joy. He had finally done something that no one could ignore. Or so he thought. The night he received the news, he rushed to tell his parents, hoping for a different reaction this time. But their response was quick and dismissive. "Oh, that's nice, but did you know Emma is also thinking about applying to college? We need to focus on her future now." Ethan felt his stomach drop. Even after all his hard work, it still wasn't enough. It never would be. Ethan's life took a turn the day he received an unexpected phone call. His paternal grandmother, Margaret, spoke with a serious yet gentle voice. "Sweetheart, your grandfather passed away this morning." The news hit him like a punch. Though his grandfather, Mr. William, was never an overly affectionate man, he always treated Ethan with a level of respect that no one else in the family did. Unlike his parents, his grandfather took an interest in his education, asked about his dreams, and often reminded him that he was smart and hardworking. The funeral was quiet but filled with tension. Ethan noticed how his family seemed more concerned with financial matters than mourning. Whispers about the inheritance echoed through the halls. And then, the shocking revelation came. In his will, his grandfather left $500,000 to each grandchild. It was life-changing money for Ethan. He saw a way to finally gain independence, to pay for college without relying on his parents. But before he could fully process the news, his parents pulled him aside for a talk. "Ethan, you know Emma needs this money more than you do, right?" his mother said, her voice more commanding than suggesting. He felt his blood boil. It was always the same story. Always Emma first. "What? The money was left to me. I have needs too." His father sighed, exasperated. "Your grandfather didn't know what he was doing. We understand the reality better. And the reality is that Emma has more expenses. She wants to study abroad, she needs a better car, and you, well, you've always been independent." That word echoed in Ethan's mind. Independent. It wasn't independence, it was abandonment. The weight of his parents' words still lingered in his mind, like an open wound. Ethan knew the situation wasn't just about money. It was about being recognized as someone worthy, someone who wasn't always overlooked. What his parents wanted to do was deny him the right to decide his own future. It was once again Emma first, and Ethan, as always, pushed to the side. That night, as he sat in his room, he reflected on everything he had done for himself. No matter how hard he worked, he was always belittled, as if he didn't deserve the same opportunities. But that was going to change. He refused to keep letting others dictate his life for him. That's when he decided to turn to Margaret, his grandmother, for answers. She had always been a safe harbor, someone he could trust without fear of judgment. He knew his grandmother wasn't easily manipulated, and if anyone could help him understand what had really happened with the will, it was her. "Grandma, I need to talk to you about Grandpa's will," he said, his voice trembling. Margaret welcomed him with a warm hug, but her expression quickly became serious. "I knew this would happen, my dear. Your mom and dad tried to convince your grandfather to leave more money to Emma. They didn't want you to receive the same amount, but your grandfather was always firm in his belief that the inheritance should be split equally among all the grandchildren. He believed each of you deserved the same opportunity." These words were like a blade cutting through Ethan's frustration. This was what he needed to hear, the truth. His grandfather never wanted favoritism, he wanted fairness. And Ethan finally had the confirmation that he was right to fight for what was his. He felt empowered, not just by the inheritance, but by the understanding that, in some way, his grandfather was still on his side. Even after death, he now knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to let his parents take what was rightfully his. "Grandma, I'm going to fight for what's mine. I'll make sure my share of the inheritance is kept," Ethan said, a renewed determination in his voice. Margaret smiled, proud. "I always knew you'd have the strength, Ethan. Now you have all of our support." The day had finally arrived. Ethan knew that the confrontation with his parents was inevitable, but he didn't realize it would be so difficult. After weeks of them trying to convince him to give in to their wishes, he couldn't put off the conversation any longer. He was determined to defend what was rightfully his, but at the same time, he feared it might cause an irreparable rift in the family. On the afternoon of the meeting, Ethan mentally prepared himself. What would he say? How would he explain that he was no longer the same boy who accepted being overlooked? He was about to reveal something that could change the family dynamic forever. When he sat down at the table with his parents, the atmosphere was thick with tension. His father, John, was visibly nervous, fiddling with his glass, while his mother, Helen, stared at him with an expression of distrust. "Ethan, we've already talked about this. You know Emma needs the inheritance for her dreams," his mother began, trying to assert authority. But Ethan was no longer willing to passively accept her words. He looked straight at her, his eyes firm. I know what you're going to say, but the issue isn't about what Emma needs, it's about what is rightfully mine. I'm not giving up this inheritance. It's not fair. His mother's response was immediate, her voice filled with anger. You're being selfish, Ethan. Your sister needs help studying abroad. She doesn't have the same opportunities as you. She doesn't have the same opportunities as me? Those words hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. How could he, someone who had always fought for everything, be seen as the privileged one? It's not selfishness, Mom. I'm making sacrifices too. I'm fighting to build my future. Why does no one see that? Ethan fired back, feeling his anger rise. His father then intervened, his usual rigid posture taking over. You're being immature, Ethan. You don't know what you're doing. Emma has more needs than you, and that's what matters. You've got your life sorted. Those words made Ethan lose his patience. He stood up from his chair. The tension in the air was palpable. No, Dad, I have more needs than you think. I've spent my whole life trying to earn what was mine. You've never recognized my efforts, and now you think you can decide my future? I'm not allowing this anymore. There was something different in his stance. For the first time, he was putting himself first, stepping away from the role of the submissive child he had always been. And this change was visible to his parents. They were no longer facing the boy who accepted being ignored, but a man who finally knew his worth. Helen and John sat in silence. The weight of Ethan's words hung in the air. That's when Margaret entered the room. She had overheard the conversation in the hallway and could no longer stay quiet. I won't let this happen, Helen. John, I've already told Ethan the truth, and he's only defending what is rightfully his. You're not going to take my grandson's inheritance. Margaret's words were like the weight of truth that had to be heard. Her support was exactly what Ethan needed to feel truly empowered. It was no longer just his fight against his parents. It was a fight for justice, for the dignity he deserved. After the confrontation, Ethan was left with a mixed feeling. He knew he had done the right thing, but he couldn't shake the sense that there was a heavy cloud hanging over his relationship with his parents. They no longer saw him as the obedient son who accepted their orders without question. The respect he had finally earned didn't come without a price, and he felt it in every cold glance his parents threw at him, as if he had broken something irreparable. On the other hand, Emma, his sister's behavior was something unexpected. During the argument with their parents, Ethan couldn't help but notice the look of surprise and discomfort on her face. Although Emma had always been the favorite, always receiving privileges and attention, she had never been confronted with her own privileges. Now, seeing her brother fight for what had always been ignored, a change started to take place in her. The next morning, Emma went to Ethan's room. She walked in without knocking, as she always had, but there was something different in her demeanor. She looked visibly nervous, a little uncomfortable, but also more mature. Ethan, we need to talk. I don't know what happened between us, but... She started, her voice trembling. Ethan looked at her, unsure of what to expect. His sister, who had always had everything handed to her, was here, trying to position herself on a ground he never imagined she would want to claim. I didn't know you felt this way, Emma continued. I always thought you had everything you wanted, but I realize now that I was wrong. I always thought it was fair, but I never looked at what you went through. Ethan fell silent, surprise taking over him. He hadn't expected those words. He hadn't expected Emma to acknowledge, even for a second, what he had gone through. I'm really sorry, Ethan. I know I need to change the way I see things. I don't know what to do to ask for your forgiveness, but I want to try. I'm going to start taking care of myself. I won't depend on you guys anymore, she said with a tone of sincerity. Though Ethan had begun to feel more confident after his fight, now he found himself facing something he never imagined. His sister apologizing, acknowledging the privileges she had always received, and more importantly, deciding to become independent. He didn't know if this was a reflection of his own behavior or if she was truly starting to change, but something within him felt relieved. I don't know what to say, Emma. This is a big change for both of us, but I hope you really try. I don't want to be caught in the middle of this fight anymore, and you shouldn't either. We need balance. Emma nodded, her eyes a bit brighter, as if the guilt and weight of years of privilege had finally been acknowledged. At that moment, Ethan understood that the fight for independence didn't only affect himself. He was inspiring his sister to pursue a different future, a future where equity and fairness were the foundations, not the advantage of one over the other. She was finally beginning to see the world with different eyes, and that was something Ethan never imagined would happen. But at the same time, he knew the path would be long. It wouldn't be easy for Emma to distance herself from the life of privileges she had always known. The family pressures would continue to exist. However, what mattered most to Ethan at that moment was realizing that, by standing his ground, he had given his sister the chance to rebuild herself too. It was a typical afternoon when Ethan received a phone call from his mother. He hesitated for a moment, but he knew he couldn't avoid the confrontation forever. He answered, and her voice, usually full of demands, now seemed sad and vulnerable. "Ethan, I wanted to talk to you about what happened. I don't know how to say this, but you were right," his mother said, a tone he hadn't heard before. "I regret what we did to you. I realize now how much we didn't value you." Ethan fell silent, absorbing her words. It was hard to believe that, after all this time, his mother was finally acknowledging what he had been through. He had always known that their approval would never be easy to earn, but now she was, finally, unveiling the truth. "I know you must be very angry with us, but I hope that one day you'll forgive me. I don't want our relationship to be defined by this. I don't want you to pull away from us," she continued. His mother was apologizing, but these weren't the usual, empty, automatic apologies. They were filled with genuine regret. And as hard as it was, Ethan knew this moment was the closure of a cycle. I don't know what to think, Mom. I've always waited for this, but now that you're saying it, it feels like it's too late," he replied, his voice trembling. "I don't want to live the rest of my life under the weight of past mistakes, but I can't just ignore them either." It was a moment of decision. Ethan needed to decide whether he would accept the apology and move toward healing, or if he would cut off permanently, as his father had always suggested. But as much as he wanted to be free from the pain, he knew forgiveness was also a long journey. "I want to believe you've changed, Mom, but things won't be the same. I need to rebuild trust, and that will take time," he replied. He knew that forgiving didn't mean forgetting, but it was the only way he could move forward. From that moment on, he knew there would still be challenges ahead. His mother was trying, but that didn't mean everything was magically fixed. Their relationship was fractured, and it needed to be reconstructed with care. Hanging up the phone brought a sense of relief and uncertainty. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to understand what had just happened. He knew that what was going on with his parents wasn't something he could change immediately, but maybe there was a future of healing ahead, a healing he too needed to seek in his own maturing process. In the days that followed, the tension still lingered in the air. His relationship with his mother was far from perfect, but something had shifted. He saw his mother trying to connect in small ways, like when she invited him to lunch without pressure, without expectations. For Ethan, that meant something. He felt like he could finally breathe again. And it wasn't just about his parents, but about allowing himself to grow, and more importantly, allowing himself to be who he truly was. However, the biggest change came when Emma sought him out once again. Now she seemed different, more mature, as if she too had learned a valuable lesson. "Ethan, I'm trying. I know I can't just expect things to improve overnight, but I'm here for real," she said with an earnest look. Ethan smiled for the first time in a long while. He had inspired his sister, and now he saw that she was beginning to change too. He was no longer alone in this journey. "I know, Emma. I see it. And more importantly, I see that we're finally beginning to break the cycle. I trust you to go beyond that, like you said. But please don't pressure me. I just want us to be able to grow together, as adults, without any more resentments." The following days showed that Ethan and his family's journey was far from over, but the seed of change had been planted. He knew the road would be long, that there would be moments of regression, but something inside him knew that, finally, he and the rest of the family were ready to grow and improve together. Time seemed to slow down as Ethan looked out the window of his newly acquired apartment. It was the beginning of a new phase in his life. The inheritance money had become more than just a payment. He had used every penny to redirect his life, but most importantly, it symbolized the freedom he had long sought during all those years of neglect and disregard. Ethan knew that the journey wasn't completely over. He still had a lot to learn, especially about building a future without being crushed by his family's expectations. He had not only distanced himself from his parents' toxic influence, but he was also beginning to take charge of his own story. He had dreams, projects, and the confidence that he could achieve them on his own. The most important thing was that he had lost the fear of failing. He knew mistakes would happen, but what mattered was his ability to rise again. But like all stories of new beginnings, the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Ethan was facing the challenges of a new chapter, with a sense of solitude that, on one hand, gave him an unexpected peace, but on the other, reminded him of what he had lost along the way. He no longer saw the familiar faces of old friends, the childhood acquaintances, or the interactions around the dinner table with his family. Yet he knew that loss was being overcome over time because he was starting to build new bonds, stronger, more authentic, and more aligned with who he truly was. The first significant change came when he decided to invest in what he truly loved. Ethan had always had a secret dream of creating a community center, a place where young people like him, who had suffered under family and societal pressures, could find support, guidance, and the opportunity to dream bigger. He had set aside part of the inheritance for the project, and it was beginning to take shape. The first steps were the hardest, with logistical and financial difficulties, but Ethan was determined that nothing would stop him. As he worked on the project, Ethan also began to notice how much he had changed over time. The confidence he now felt didn't come from money or independence alone, but from the wisdom he had gained. He knew he couldn't just erase the scars of the past, but now he had the power to choose how those experiences would shape him. Looking back, what he felt was a mix of anger, sadness, and grief. But over time, he started replacing those emotions with a renewed acceptance. He accepted that the pain of the past should no longer be his burden, but rather a force propelling him into the future. With every small success at the community center, Ethan felt more fulfilled. What had seemed like a distant goal was becoming a tangible reality. But the true testament to his transformation came in a simple moment, when he met Emma, his sister, once again. After a long period of no contact, she was different, much more mature, and unlike before, there was no longer that look of distrust between them. "Ethan, I know you've been focusing on your future, but what you're doing is amazing. I see now what you mean to so many people, and I want to be by your side. I want to be part of this," Emma said, her eyes filled with sincerity. It was a moment of recognition. Ethan felt a wave of emotion as he realized his sister was growing, and more importantly, she was willing to walk alongside him. "Emma, you've always been important to me. Even when we drifted apart, all I ever wanted was to see you well, and now you're starting to find yourself. Let's do this together and make a difference in a way we never did before," Ethan replied with a genuine smile. This reunion was the last key that Ethan needed to feel finally at peace with himself and his family. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but now he was ready to face them head on, with the certainty that he was no longer alone. He had learned how to live on his own terms, and that gave him the strength to make the right choices. Ethan's final message to the world was that true freedom didn't come from external things, like money or others' approval. Freedom came from within. It came from the ability to forgive oneself, to reinvent oneself, and, above all, from the courage to be who you truly are, without fear of what the future holds.
Ethan's story is a powerful reminder of how favoritism can shape an entire life. It's not just about the inheritance, it's about the fight for dignity and the right to be seen for who you truly are. What he faced was a battle to be acknowledged, to finally have his hard work recognized. Often, our journey is about finding the strength to move forward, even when everything and everyone seems to be against us. Ethan shows us that we can't let the past dictate our future, and sometimes the greatest victories come from confronting our hardest struggles. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were in Ethan's shoes, what would you do? Would you give in to your family's pressure, or would you make a bold move to change your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about how each of us would handle this situation. And don't forget to like and share, because your story deserves to be heard too. Let's find out together what happens at the end of this journey.